We very explicitly told you all to stop buying stuff. And then somebody comes in and cuts their finger off. Those are not great numbers. So that is how you apply for a job at Slant 3D. It's this stupid copyright that doesn't do anything. Seems a little bit off, doesn't it? People screw this up all the time. Get some work done. 1908 is a very special year. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Slant 3D podcast, the show about 3D printing and our place inside the industry. Today, we're going to be talking about a whole lot of NanoDimension, how a flying car was 3D printed, and then finishing off with why our copyrights are all 1908. Stand by, it's going to be a good one. All right, moving right into financials. Or not financials, the news. NanoDimension shutters Atom Tech. Fabrica, Formtech, and DeepCube. Okay, so this is per TCT. NanoDimension, we've talked about multiple times, has been doing a lot of restructuring since it was basically taken over from the previous CEO by effectively an activist investor who wanted to clean stuff up because NanoDimension has been buying a lot of stuff that apparently was not terribly useful. According to a letter from the CEO, Afir Bahara, following the publication of the company's 2024 financial results, the moves, together with broader organizational efficiencies, have enabled the company to reduce annualized operating expenses of its core business by over $20 million and deliver a 52% increase in revenue per employee from $147,000 to $223,000. The letter describes the hard look the company has taken at its portfolio, including unwarranted management overhead, breaking down silos, particularly in sales and marketing, realignment of the organization around the customer. Bahara also provided further comment on NanoDimension's Desktop Metal and Markforged acquisitions. While the company is still in the early stages of its review of Markforged, which closed in a deal worth $116 million last week, the letter highlighted Desktop Metal's limited liquidity and significant liabilities. Okay. So, all of these, basically what NanoDimension is doing is NanoDimension bought a whole bunch of companies over the last few years. They had a bunch of cash standing around, so they bought a bunch of companies. And when you buy a company, you are integrating them into your company, and that company has an accounting department and a marketing department and a sales department. And then you bring them over into your company, who has a marketing department and a sales department and an accounting department. So for a period of time, acquired companies very often continue to operate kind of independently. And then slowly are integrated. But it's really ineffective because you have two accounting departments doing the same thing. And then this accounting department does the math and then sends it over to these guys who then add it all together. And it's just kind of silly because there's you have increased operational costs without increased operations. You can do it way more efficiently to where the overhead is much lower for the total. So it increases the efficiency. It increases the efficiency a lot. To go from revenue per employee from 150 to 220, that's a lot of inefficiency. So it's good that they're doing this from an operational standpoint, basically consolidating it in. Also having everybody in the same room lets everybody kind of share because like the NanoDimension sales guys can now sell the Fabrica stuff rather than the Fabrica guys selling it separately and making your clients angry and all the rest of it. So more revenue can be generated. So this is an efficiency thing. It sounds like, as they're shuttering these, that they're unprofitable. And maybe some of them were, but as a whole, it appears to be mainly around efficiency. Except for Desktop Metal. Desktop Metal came into NanoDimension with $115 million in liabilities as a convertible note. And we've talked about this a bunch. We have Desktop Metal and NanoDimension every week for the last little while. But Desktop Metal is sort of toxic as an asset because they had $30 million in cash, $115 million in debt, and not enough revenue. So it wasn't really a very good deal from the outside looking in, except that Desktop Metal has a bunch of patents. But NanoDimension completes Markforged acquisition. Markforged, they purchased for $116 million. That all closed. Markforged, if you're not familiar, makes very sexy looking carbon fiber printing FDM printers. And they're very good machines, and Markforged has always had very good machines. I would say that Markforged, today everybody would understand it as Markforged had bamboo quality years ago. But Markforged also just had a really solid kind of operational business. They did a lot of things well around both material supply, the machines themselves, service contracts around the machines, and giving those machines increased capability over time. They never had a ton of installs. Markforged, I believe, had about like 15,000, 20,000 machines deployed, which is not a lot. Each machine cost $5,000 or $10,000, which was not nothing. Yes, Markforged had exactly 15,000 systems across leading industrial customers. And Markforged solutions have achieved nearly 50% gross margins. Gross is a key thing. Gross margin is when you sell the machine, how much money you make back from the cost of the machine. Doesn't include overhead, doesn't include taxes, doesn't include rent. It's kind of silly in that regard as a math point. But 15,000 machines deployed around, that's not a huge install base as machinery deployment goes, but in the industrial sector, it really is. So and those are also serve as like beachheads into those customers. So now NanoDimension can upsell those customers on metal printing or whatever the heck else they have around there. So literally just as kind of an email list, it's pretty darn valuable because it's like, hey, we're Markforged. We have these other machines now. And you can sell through a lot more easily if they're happy with the Markforged machines, which honestly, I haven't met anybody who's like wildly disappointed by Markforged machines unless they wanted them to do something that they don't do. So anyhow, Markforged also had a pretty aggressive sales team for a period of time. A lot of the 3D printing companies did. Markforged's aggression, though, was kind of a bad layout of territories and that kind of thing. But anyhow, 3D printing financials. Proto Labs reports 3D printing dip, but metal 3D printing orders grow. This is per 3dprint.com. Okay. Proto Labs brought in $126 million in revenue during the first quarter of 2025, just 1.3% below the same period last year. While the year-over-year dip is small, it reflects a bigger slowdown in manufacturing. Net income was $3.6 million, down from $5.3 million. Meanwhile, EBITDA came in at 13. Okay, so effectively, this all comes to Proto Labs has about a 10% gross margin, and about a 2% net margin, which is not very good. Now, admittedly, yes, there's all these manufacturing headwinds. But at the same time, Dan Shoemaker called Proto Labs profitability industry leading and pointed out that the company has strong free cash flow, zero debt, and $160 million in cash and investments. That's not the same thing. During the first quarter, we generated $18.4 million in cash from operations during the first quarter and returned $20.9 million to shareholders through stock repurchases. Those are not the same thing. Cash from operations, net income is the thing that generates that is profitability. Net income is profitability. If you're dealing with EBITDA and that kind of stuff, them's not real numbers because taxes and rent and overhead and that kind of stuff are all kind of a part of it. EBITDA can be calculated around overhead a little bit differently, but those are not great numbers. Now, in the manufacturing industry, if Proto Labs is comparing themselves to other injection molders, they might be ahead there, but most injection molders have a net profit of about 2 to 3%, which is not good as a business because it gives you very little capability to grow. Costco, who has very stringent margin requirements, still ends up at like 5%. But as far as 3D printing goes, CNC machining revenue grew 6%, and injection molding declined 7%, and 3D printing revenue dropped 6%. Yeah, they're trying to go into production, blah, 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 all this stuff. Ultimately, this just isn't very good, but Proto Labs has a lot of revenue going by. 26 million per quarter is a lot of cash going by, but it doesn't convert into actual value creation. Right now, I don't know what Proto Labs valuation is, but the last time I was checking, I believe it was below 500 million. They peaked at 1 billion for a period of time when they were kind of on the 3D printing hype train with everybody else. But ultimately, as a manufacturing company, manufacturing companies have a very hard time capturing value because they're a middleman. This is kind of like the Apple-Foxconn relationship. Apple is a $3 trillion company, but Foxconn makes all their phones, and Foxconn is a $200 billion company, a lot smaller, because they have no brand recognition outside of operations. In fact, the only middleman manufacturer, contract manufacturer I know of who has outstanding returns is TSMC, who makes the chips for everybody. Everybody sends them the design for the chip, and TSMC is a foundry business that makes it for them. That area still has tremendous value, mainly because there's so much skill, very, very rare skill in producing chips to where they can create a competitive moat that someone won't say, I'm just going to build that and go. On the Slant 3D side, for us, we've always known that production and manufacturing declines and commoditizes very quickly. Our way of capturing it is through our services like Teleport and that kind of stuff, to where there's a much higher value created for the customer, to where customers don't really want to replace us. The option is build your own print farm and operate it, which is way more expensive and way more miserable than people realize, or just upload a model to Teleport and Slant 3D, which is way easier than anything else, because it's free to get started, and it gives you 1,000 machines to operate your business. So the value creation there is huge, not to mention the fact that you eliminate shipping and eliminate warehousing and all this other stuff. So those are large enough differences in value to where, yes, we're manufacturing parts, but we're doing so much more than that. We are a warehouse where the shelves make the products. So we're warehousing, shipping, and manufacturing all wrapped into one. Okay, next piece of news. Flying AirBike. May the 4th be with you last week. Polish maker flies his 3D printed airbike, a real-life speeder, 3dprint.com. So a video went viral a little bit of the last week from Volonaut AirBike. It was a YouTube video, went on Instagram, that kind of stuff too. But basically, a guy riding what looks like the front cowl of a motorbike that's flying. Basically, just a jet engine centered down between him. To say this was 3D printed is a tad generous. The cowls and like the covers of it were 3D printed, where he would 3D print it and then he would impregnate the prints with the carbon fiber prints with resin in order to basically do kind of a hardened carbon fiber part that was 3D printed to get the geometry. It's used in drones and that kind of stuff pretty often. But it's a nifty way to make some lightweight parts and make this thing look cool and legit, other than it just being a guy mounted on a jet engine. But the thing flew and it worked. And this guy has actually worked with a little flying drone company before. Excuse me. Sorry. Checking that timestamp there. But it was cool because, yes, of course it's 3D printed because chunks of these things are always 3D printed. But it's a fun thing to call out. And like there's a lot of these types of parts out there to where 3D printing is enabling it. If it went into production, he would do a wet layup carbon fiber mold or something along those lines, because that would be a better thing to do. And I'm sure there's no doubt been a bunch of people contact him and say, hey, if this is real, let's go ahead and make it. So he's probably going to start ramping up production here at some point. There's a lot of kind of these flying car motorbikes being created. There's like the Jetson and that kind of stuff. And I think this guy was affiliated with Jetson. So it's just kind of fun. They're dangerous as all get out. Because a lot of them don't have redundancy in, especially this one. Because again, jet engine only. If it goes down, it has no way of recovery. And if it flies at a weird spot to where it's high off the ground to where you can hurt yourself, but not high enough to where you can like throw a parachute or something like that. So they're a weird sort of device, but they will definitely start to become a thing. Like a motorbike is dangerous too. You can drive into a tree or whatever, and you go over jumps and all the rest of this kind of stuff. So they'll absolutely start to become a more enthusiast sort of market, and it'll be fun to see. I can't wait to see until there's enough to where like people are well enough trained on it to just like intensely go at a thing. Okay, here we go. Moving into the company updates. Teleport. Updates with Teleport. We stopped new signups of Teleport. Number one, there's just a bunch of people inside of it. We want to make sure they're taken care of. But also, we are doing some major updates to Teleport. So a totally free shipping alternative will be coming out here really soon, so that you no longer have to have ShipStation along with it. And then there's a bunch of other updates that are like dropping just about the same time as that. Very likely at the same time, but I'm not going to promise that. But a bunch of great feature updates. And so yeah, it'll get down to totally free again without ancillary fees and that kind of thing. And then, but with Teleport, an interesting thing with Teleport, I recommend going over to the Reddit community where we talk about all this stuff. But with Teleport, a company problem that we have. We're producing thousands of parts per day, hundreds to thousands of parts per day for Teleport. The challenge with it is that when it's going well for someone, they don't go chat about it online. Especially if your business is going well, a lot of people inside of 3D printing don't share, hey, I just sold 1,000 of these through Teleport. It creates a weird scenario because the only people who are on the Reddit are people who ordered a single prototype and it's one of the 1,000 parts that went out or something that's a little bit out of spec, or the person designed a poor part. And we printed it and we sent along feedback of like, watch out for this and that kind of stuff, and it goes wrong. And then that person ends up on the Reddit. Basically, we have a problem of like, yes, the negative responses appear like there's a lot, but even though there's a ton of positive responses to it, it's not bad. There's like a couple of them, but it's more than people. Actually, it's not even that, but it's a thing we're concerned about. Because going forward, that's the thing, is that the negative people are loud and the positive people are silent. So I'm discussing this out loud mainly just to see like if anybody has feedback about how to do this. Like we could poll our users for reviews and testimonials and that kind of thing. But testimonials are kind of chintzy because they're like one review from a person. Like we have the story of like Little Ouchies who sold like 100,000 stuff in a month and that kind of thing. They're really good stories of really big success stories. But we're trying to figure out how to get more of the good reviews to come out to the surface more often. And I don't know if it's an incentive structure. Well, that would be one, but then you're buying reviews, which is disingenuous, and you don't want to do that. But one of the things we came up with is like, we're probably going to do a video where we just roast ourselves. And to where like we're gonna go through and just like show off what our actual warts are and that kind of stuff, because there's plenty. Teleport is still a very new piece of software and a very new product. There's plenty of warts on it. But just to get them out there, so they're like, yeah, we already know, we're working on that kind of a thing. Because, but also I'm interested. No, not there. I don't know. The dynamics of the platform, because we want it free and we want it open. We think it's really important that it continue to be free and open. But when you have a free service, anybody can use it. Therefore, folks who aren't very familiar with it will upload something and have a bad experience. It's like, this is the best knife in the world. We made it so sharp that you can cut onions for 20 years and chefs everywhere love it. And then somebody comes in and cuts their finger off as a home cook, that kind of a thing. And they're like, the knife doesn't work. And you're holding it upside down. But how can we better sort the users on Teleport to where people who are familiar with 3D printing or aware of the limitations and that kind of stuff are the ones using it? Because it's this weird sort of hybrid of like somebody with a printer at home then uploads to Teleport, and then the phrase is, it's not what I get from my printer. It's like, yeah, no, because it's not your Bamboo lab with your little preset settings with that material. It's a different material, different machine, different settings. So you have to design your part to be robust. So we educate about this, but people don't watch stuff. I would be fascinated if there's someone out there who's worked with this type of a product before, if we can get you as a consultant for a moment to be like, here's the trick that you do with that in order to sort your people out. You can do it a little bit from branding. You can do it a little bit through upfront tutorials inside of the app. You can, of course, make the app intuitive. You can have warnings inside of there. But again, no matter how much of that you do, people will always fall through the cracks. And it'll never be a perfect system, and I understand that. But man, we got to get closer. So if somebody has like tremendous insights around that, about both like sorting user base so that a particular user demographic shows in, which we can do because we have targeted content and we have targeted ads and that kind of thing. But even so, well, here's what it is. I would love to know what a reasonable statistic is for like good users as a ratio compared to bad users. Is there some expectation to set in these types of applications? Because this is the first time building a thing of teleport. Is there somebody in print on demand out there who's built one of those pieces of software that has the types of analytics of like the quota or the ratios of like, this is what you should expect from your user base? There's going to be 2 out of 10 guys who whine and complain and do all the time, and you port them over there to talk to a chatbot, and then there's the other 8 that matter and you need to take care of, and so on and so forth, and that kind of thing, or whatever the ratio is. If there's somebody in our audience who like knows those kind of things, please hit us up because I would love to know. Okay, Tangled updates. We were almost caught up, and then we got behind again and that kind of stuff. But Tangled is rolling. We had a delay. We were adding in another extruder, and there's been a delay on that. So new signups for memberships may stay closed for a little bit because we got to make sure we're taking care of our existing people. We're getting through that backlog, and we'll get ahead of it here very soon. I know. I feel like I've been saying this for a bunch, but then the next week everything all ramps. And by the way, we very explicitly told you all to stop buying stuff last week, and you all very explicitly did not follow that advice. Tangled's such an interesting thing because we started it effectively as a side project, and now it gets a section of podcast and is effectively a business unit inside the company. Tangled, I'm quite certain, is probably there's 12. There's 2 3D printing filament manufacturers inside the U.S., but like we're not nothing in the context of that market. It's really quite surprising how large it's become. Many of the filament manufacturers inside the U.S. are very small, so it's not, again, like a big thing to have, a big piece of pride within it. But it is amazing how large it is in the context of it is, and that we don't care. I want to say we don't care, but Tangled's always been kind of the redheaded stepchild. If it failed, I wouldn't lose sleep at night if Tangled just went off the edge of the cliff, because again, it's something we don't have to do. It's something we do because we think it's good to create this price pressure for other people and also have this feedstock for folks if they're able to manage around it. And by the way, in the context of like print farms using Tangled and that kind of stuff, we are working on how to business model that out. We don't want to do quoting or anything else. All the pricing will be flat. It's $10 a spool. We're not going to quote you $9.95 of like, oh, I bought 1,000 spools. No, it's $10 a spool. You're doing fine. But we want to avoid the surges in it. So we may introduce like a net 30 situation or something along those lines to where there's a separate ordering place for print farmers, and we will also probably be putting a unit cap on actual orders themselves of like 10 spools at a time or something like that, max, so that we don't have those surges of somebody dropping in and saying, I need 200 spools, and we're like, 600 kilograms of material in the middle of our stuff. That kind of slows us down from our normal kind of the guys who order 1 spool. We could fulfill 200 individual guys, or we have that one guy who drops in the middle of us, makes a big old splash. We got to work through that and potentially delay other folks, which is kind of the situation that we're in right now, is that we just had a bunch of those types of orders. Thank you for the orders, but it's just like these growing pains. Every time, Tangled is about 10 times bigger than it was a year ago. And literally had like a 30% growth month over month of the last month or so. So those are growing pains that we're dealing with. So yeah, all that. But yeah, we'll work through it. We're getting it figured out, but just all the stuff. And again, Tangled, of the things that we focus on inside of it, like Teleport gets our primary focus, and then Tangled is a separate business unit, because Tangled has like a really long-term, 10-year sort of value to it. But right now, it's not a huge profit generator. It generates a reasonable amount of revenue, but it's not a profit generator. So anyhow, okay. Moving on to the next thing, we are at 25. Okay. Discussion topic. Why do you use 1908 as a copyright on all your websites? I love this. This comes up a bunch. The copyright at the bottom of the website is the stupidest thing in the world. And I don't know why it's there, and quite frankly, I don't know why I didn't have the guys delete it. I am sure that there is a perfectly valid reason for it out there somewhere, and I'm sure it's probably based in old internet lore or something, to where if your website has content, you want to copyright it, but that content... that statement down below isn't an actual copyright. If you want to copyright a website, you have to go and file a copyright of the website of like, oh, we're the New York Times. This is all our content. We're sending it over there. You have to like kind of validate it. There's some copyright value in publishing to where it's protected. And this is hashtag not a lawyer, but like there's simply publishing a thing does not necessarily give you the copyright to it. But everybody putting that copyright tag at the bottom of the website seems to imply that there is. I don't care. Our website is for information, and our website is constantly changing. So yes, technically somebody could clone it, but even if we put the copyright tag down under there, the internet is big and somebody could still clone it. Or slightly change it and get out of copyright. So I think the copyright tag is dumb. Since it's dumb, and also there's the thing in a lot of our websites don't have, they're built on like website builders so that like the marketing team can work with them and other people can work with them without having to write HTML. They can just graphically move it around. But those sites are limited, so you can't have like a little JavaScript in there that changes the year based on the date automatically. So there have been times in the past where it had the wrong year for like 2 weeks, and then we had to listen to people comment about, well, you got a 2023 and it's 2024. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's a stupid copyright that doesn't do anything. That all being said, since it's useless, doesn't do anything, the option was to delete it, and I don't know why we didn't just delete it, but I thought it would be funnier to change it to a year that's more interesting. And I thought sort of blatantly intentional, because yeah, the internet didn't exist in 1908. People correcting us and being like, your copyright says 1908. Yeah, seems a little bit off, doesn't it? Even for like a template. I'm sure all the templates automatically pick a time in the early 20th century as the copyright date, rather than like when the template was made. 1908 is a very special year. And I decided to take this opportunity to reinforce kind of the culture and the ideals of Slant 3D with this year. Hopefully, maybe somebody have caught on to what happened that year if you're a buff in manufacturing history. But 1908 is the year the Model T went into production. I like that because the Model T was the exact same car, made in any color you want so long as it was black, and they made bajillions of them. And it was the first time that like really reliable manufacturing was making a complex mechanism. Because prior to that, the only things that had really been manufactured were like guns. And even then, not even really guns. Like the Model T helped with that also, which then led to World War II and manufactured arms. But it's just we picked a year that was kind of an Easter egg, and we put it on the copyright of all of our websites because it's a stupid thing otherwise, and I don't care. And yeah, Maybe someday somebody will tell me, oh, Gabe, you have to fix the copyright. Otherwise, people can clone your website. I'm like, I don't care. The website's going to change again in here in 2 weeks anyway because we move fast. If the competitive advantage is people not copying you because you have a copyright or patent or anything else, you're kind of dying already anyway. Go get some work done. Okay. How to apply to a job. One other discussion topic. How to apply for a job at Slant 3D. So we've been posting a bunch of jobs since we finished the Series A and that kind of stuff. We're hiring people, mainly developers and that kind of thing. And people really don't know how to apply for a job. So let me please educate you how to apply for a job. Number one, try to get to the careers page. If there's not a contact form there, that's fine. I know we don't. I'm pretty sure we just have an info, just an email. If you are sending an application into an email, like an info at, which is a fairly generic email, there's probably a lot of stuff going in there. You need your resume to pop out. You need the subject line to say what it is you're doing. And that subject line should be resume, job title, why you're great, or just resume job title. Resume, software developer for backend. Resume, software developer for teleport. Resume, production manager for Tangled. I don't know what all. Put that in the subject line. A lot of people put random crap into the subject line of like, I really love what you're doing, this, that, and the other thing, which is great, but that doesn't mean a job application. That's a fan letter, which may be read, but it or may not. They might go to subject line because we got to get to the work or finding the people that we're trying to hire. Also, it's a bad sign about your directness and your ability to get from point A to point B if you can't even apply to the job in a direct manner and you round about it. Get to the point. Resume application for software developer, subject line. Done. Okay, we know what that is. We can also search it up. If somebody sees the message and then says, go find it again, and then we had another 200 messages in the time in between, now we're scrolling trying to remember what your subject line was. Whereas if you put in resume, we search resume, and then there's all the resumes. And then we can look you up. Nextly, inside of the job post, I do not care how much you love Slant 3D if you're applying for a job. I love everybody who loves Slant 3D, but if you're applying for a job, there is a different criteria here. I don't care how much you believe in the mission and all the rest of it. That comes later. If you're applying for a job and you want to get our attention, I want to see examples of amazing execution, examples of competence. People will send in a cover letter about how much they believe in Slant 3D and everything else, but they have no link to their work and sometimes not even a resume attached. And we do not respond to that. If you simply send in a cover letter, in that cover letter, that better be, I created the robot that did this. And then here's a link to prove it. Otherwise, it's ignored. And people screw this up all the time. A resume seems like a demonstration of past work, but it's not. A resume is a list of your past jobs. I care about your most impressive piece of work. If you worked at a company, you figure out how to describe what it is you did there without breaking the NDA so that we understand what you did. I worked on e-commerce applications and I decreased the latency by 20% and that kind of stuff or something along those lines. I don't know. Be specific and direct. Not, I worked on this team. I don't care that you worked at Apple. Apple's a big company. I'm sure there's plenty of useless people there. But I want to know what you did, what your actual competence is. And if you're a developer, I want to see a GitHub. If you're a designer, I want to see a portfolio. If you're a salesperson, I want to know month over month growth and how fast you did that. And if you're a production worker or something like that, I want to know how long you stayed there and how efficient you were in some kind of a way. If you're a designer, yeah, I want to know what products you made. I want to see the thing you did. And then what is going to happen is that you are going to show me your best work. you're going to send a link to your portfolio, your GitHub, whatever it was. Make sure that's in there in your first email. Then we're going to look at that first work and we're going to say, was that good work or was it not? And you can tell, because you can tell. We're going to evaluate that, and then we'll decide if we want to respond to you. If we respond to you, the first question I'm going to ask is explain that thing to me. Because that will define whether you did that work or whether the team did that work and you were on the team, but weren't the one carrying the weight. People who did the thing know it intimately. If I ask you a fairly pointed question about why did you choose to use this piece of tech in that software, or why did you do this, that, or the other thing, and it's a project from 6 months ago, and you're like, I don't remember the details of why we did it, you're not going to get hired because you were not deep enough in that problem to know why you made the decisions for it. You didn't make a decision. You weren't deep enough in that problem. I can describe in detail. No. People who have worked and really wrestled with a problem remember it in detail. And it's not like, shucks, I can't remember it anymore. No, that's something that you weren't deep in the weeds on. That was like a 2-day problem. Also, by the way, 2-day problems aren't real problems. If you didn't fight and struggle with something for weeks, if not months, that's not your best work. I want to know your hardest problem and then how you solved it. And I'm going to ask you how in detail. And if you do not know how and cannot answer how in an interview, when I ask fairly specific questions about it, you won't get the job. And if you do not send across that portfolio in your first email, you're not going to get the job. If we have to ask you to send across your best work, we can't. You don't get to the point fast enough. You're applying for the job, great. Give us the information we need to evaluate you ahead of time. Okay, so that is how you apply for a job at Slant 3D. Resume / what you're applying for in the title of the subject line, and then in the email subject line, the cover letter, or in the email, have a link to your portfolio. In fact, I would probably, you can't send just a link. You have to give some context because spam. But I would click on just a link to a GitHub or something like that. Almost, if people didn't stop me. But the link to your best and hardest work, and then we will call you up, and I'll call you up out of the blue. I am very known to just dial the number with the contact information there. Also, include a phone number, because I don't want to email you back and forth and go over a 1-day cycle. I'm like, this guy's interesting. Hello, I'll leave you a voicemail, and then I'll say get back to me at some point or another. But if the work is good. And then, the first question I'm going to ask is, how'd you do this? Why'd you do it that way? And then I'm going to decide if I like your explanation. Okay, that's it, guys. A little bit shorter podcast here this week. Comment down below if there's other topics that you want us to cover. We'll do questions again next week and that kind of stuff, so we'll aggregate them up a little bit. So if you have any questions, go over to the subreddit, the 3D Print Entrepreneur subreddit, and we'll answer any questions that are there in that pinned post. And then any questions underneath the podcast here. And then last week's podcast will get covered. But all right, have a great day, everybody.